Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another Path of Exile 2 video. Today, I just wanted to give my thoughts on the endgame, and this is more from like a casual player perspective. Now, in saying that, I've got about 150 hours in PoE on PC, and probably about 20-ish on PlayStation, but I'm not near the endgame for there, so I'll kind of leave that to the side. The context, I've finished my tier 15 maps, so I've done all of those missions. And I'm basically at the point now where I'm looking for the citadels so I can play the labyrinth and doing the other endgame activities as well. And I wanted to give my feedback because I think most of the feedback I've seen has come from some of those diehard content creators, people who do it for a living, right? I don't. I work full time, have a social life outside of that as well, so I don't have as much time to jump into the game. And I think a lot of that feedback has been fair, but I think from a casual player's perspective, that is the general crowd of the game, it doesn't really land as well. Some of that feedback being, the dislike of towers, rarity being kind of a must-take stat in the endgame if you're trying to juice maps and try to get the most out of maps. Some problems with boss balance and stuff like that. Now, I think most of that is really valid. I think that feedback is valid, and a lot of these streamers and creators are playing the end game, right? They are so deep into the end game that needs to be tested. So they're doing God's work there, because I don't want that to be broken when I get there in like a couple of 100 hours time. But I think the biggest piece of the puzzle missing there is, what did grinding gear games want the end game to look like? Path of Exile 2 has come out. It's incredibly different to Path of Exile 1, but also the same in many ways. And I wonder what the general feedback from the public would be if this was a new IP. Because in many ways, it comes across as a new IP, despite sharing a lot of the same similarities from Path of Exile 1. And I think this is where we need some messaging from grinding gear games. Is the bossing expected to be as brutal as it is? Are some of these things expected? Should we be juicing maps as easily as we could in Path of Exile 1? Because currently in Path of Exile 2, finding the towers can be quite problematic, and that's what a lot of those kind of really deep content creators are kind of touching on, is that juicing maps is really hard in this space. Now, my view, obviously endgame systems, really hard to balance. But from a casual perspective, from my perspective, this one's ticking a lot of the boxes that I was kind of looking for. And I've also not consumed a lot of content. Generally, I consume a ton of gaming content, especially on the games I'm playing. But for Path of Exile 2, I've avoided it. And because of that, I'm enjoying the endgame a hell of a lot. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'll actually run over to the Atlas here as well, so I can kind of talk to it as we go. Just the Atlas itself, I think this is a fantastic concept. I think the ability to kind of go through and color maps, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I adore it. As you can see at the start here, it's kind of all I did. But I like the sprawling nature. But I do see the drawbacks people are talking about, and about not being able to pick the maps that they want to run, and being forced to obviously get from tower to tower, so that they can then use the tablets, so that they can then buff the maps kind of in the vicinity. And I think about that in the sense of, I look up here, some of these maps have had a couple of tablets added to them, so they've got a few modifiers, whereas when I go further out, these have none. And I can see the frustration for players who are at their endgame, wanting to juice those maps, of getting to an area like this. Maybe, maybe they've completed this area, they juiced it, they've done it. They get over here, and then suddenly they need to get this tower, they need to get this tower, they then need to path through here to get to this tower, to then be able to juice all the maps. But again, from the casual perspective, that's not really as much of an issue for me, because I'm still taking my time to get there. But I do acknowledge that those are concerns that I think do need to be addressed. The towers, I love the idea. My suggestion would be reduce the number of towers, but make them multi-use. Make it so that I just have to path to this tower. I can then juice all the maps here a couple of times if I choose to, and then I'm good to go, rather than needing to go to multiple spaces. So I think there's a lot of easy fixes here, and of course, this is an early access game. A lot of this is going to change in time, and this we know was kind of put together pretty quickly towards the end of development, especially as they were getting to that early access date coming up. So I think there's a lot there to do, but I think in terms of design, I think it's visually incredible. I love, like I said, the coloring in. I love having to explore and wondering what's in the fog of war, other than the towers, what's in the fog of war right here. I think that really keeps me going. And what I love is that I know as future leagues come out, we are going to see this fleshed out just insanely well. There is so many options here to just add new and wonderful things, add new points of interest, whether they do that officially or kind of stealth. They can just start adding things to the Atlas, and it's going to add just much more depth over time. Now, when it comes to actually mapping, and I'll jump into a map here that I've started up just so I can talk to it while I'm going. I do quite like the mapping experience. I don't miss fighting a boss at the end of every single map, but I have noticed that the map variety and not being able to choose my maps has started to grate on me a little bit. Now, I never really cared too much about what map I was running personally, but I did like that I could choose the maps based on my preference on what I was running. So I was running let's say a Spark build. I could run kind of closed corridor maps. That way, the sparks are bouncing more and I'm getting more from it. As you can see here, I'm playing a minion build. So for me in particular, in Path of Exile 2, running the towers, running maps with tight corridors is an absolute nightmare. Because if you're not familiar, let's actually see if it happens here. It probably shouldn't. Oh, maybe it did. No, it didn't. Minions will get stuck on everything. This is not a great example, unfortunately. But minions will just get stuck on absolutely anything. I can't believe anyone at Grinding Games plays a minion build, but hey, they did an amazing job otherwise, so I won't harp on that for too long. So that is one of my concerns with mapping, but I do like that you can choose whether you're running Breach or Ritual. You can choose if you're doing bossing or expeditions. I think that's decently well done, and I'm quite happy with that outcome. Something that I did find challenging as I was doing the quests was keeping up my waystones, making sure I had enough waystones. At the point where I was wanting to complete tier 15s, I didn't have them, or I had one. And then as soon as I used that one, I couldn't get any more for some reason. They just weren't quite dropping as frequently as I'd expected. I was crafting onto them. I was getting them up to 150 to 200% waystone drop chance on average. And I still wasn't really getting them. Or I'd get one, and then I wouldn't get another one for a few maps. So I kind of resorted to the point of buying them. Now, that also happened to me when I was running tier 7s. So I don't know if I was just a bit unlucky, or if there's maybe a stat or something in the background that isn't quite working correctly, or if this was intended design. And I know upkeep of waystones was something that I think Grinding Games may have mentioned, but again, I would love a bit of messaging here to know whether that's intentional or not. Because for a lot of these design decisions, and I'm just going to let the minions run here, if they're intentional, I kind of understand. And I think about that when I think about bosses being as challenging they are. And Citadel bosses and Labyrinth boss being obviously, one life. You get one attempt at these things and then you're gone. If that was intended design, I understand it. And I think a lot of the expectations the community are coming from, people played Path of Exile 1, they are used to a certain style of gameplay, and then they come into Path of Exile 2, and they expected something very similar. And I think what we're missing here, we just dropped a Divine, it's quite nice. And I think what we're missing here is, was that the intention from Grinding Games? Because again, if it is, I love it. Other people are still going to hate it. That's not going to change the opinion of a lot of people, but it will change the opinion of some who are on the fence about it. A lot of people might be thinking at the moment that this is unintended design and is going to be fixed, and therefore they're kind of complaining about it or providing feedback, thinking that this is something that's going to change. But if this is intended design, then we need to kind of hear that from Grinding Gear Games. The other side of things, which actually I'll have to jump out of this map to kind of show you this one. Let's jump out of here. The only other drawback I've had, which again, I could just be unlucky, I could be one of the few, I've completed all of my missions with waystones, and I have not found a single Citadel anywhere. I've not even found a trace of a Citadel. Now, I missed all the memes about, towers and the bodies and stuff like that. I didn't get sucked in any of that, so I never tried. But I have not found a Citadel anywhere, and I've not found anything to indicate where one might be. I think a small quality of life improvement would just be some level of indication about where these Citadels might be. You could even do something as simple as a road, kind of leading away from the labyrinth. Maybe it picks up here and then disappears into the sand biome, then maybe picks up over here. So that way I can come in, I can search, and then I know a general direction at the very least. Because my biggest concern right now is, you can see here's my labyrinth. My biggest concern is that there's a Citadel right here. And I just don't know it because I haven't checked yet. Because the further and further I get out, the more likely I'm thinking it might be right here, it could be right here, it could be right there. Not knowing is kind of frustrating because that's the stuff I'm ready to work towards, and I just don't know where it is. So again, that's that casual perspective. I know a bunch of people, my housemate has found them himself. I know a bunch of people have found them. I'm just not there. I'm just not there yet. I've been kind of unlucky with that. And then I guess the final piece of feedback I'll give to keep this video relatively short, it's getting on a bit already, is the Ascendancies. Again, it comes back to that expectation. Should Ascendancies be as hard as they are to get? Because I've now got my 4th Ascendancy. It took me quite a while, but I do have it. And it took me quite a while. I only got it, well, I'm level 87 now. I'd say I got it a level or 2 ago, pretty recently. Again, by the time I was comfortably completing tier 13, tier 14 maps, I went and did it, had a decent run. It was still a bit of a challenge, and I did Trial Secma, and I still needed some particular boons to be able to do it relatively comfortably. If that difficulty is intended, I'm actually okay with it, and I think it's decent. At the start, I was on the fence, but I'm actually quite liking it, because I like it as an endgame challenge and something to strive for. But again, I think there's that leftover expectation from Path of Exile 1, and people thinking that I should be able to get this Ascendancy easy because I did that in the past. And I'm not sure, again, we need something from Grunninger Games to say, no, it was an intentional choice. Because I think if we know this information, it will limit a lot of the frustration some of the player base is feeling. When it comes to actual activities themselves, I'm starting to come around on them. I don't think they're for me as endgame activities, although Trial of Secmas might be getting there for me. Weirdly enough, I didn't think I'd say that when I started playing Path of Exile 2. But it's that difficulty standard. What standard do we want to be there? But ultimately, look, as I wrap this up and I kill these last couple of rares here, I think the endgame is very well done for what it is. I think the complaints we're starting to see are from people who have put in just an insane amount of time and have done so very quickly. And they're getting to the point where the grind is a bit much. All their expectations aren't quite sitting there. For me, it's, I won't say perfect, because there's definitely a lot of things that need change, which I've touched on, like the towers, knowing where the citadels are. But those are more just quality of life things. And this is obviously an early access game, so I'm giving this feedback knowing that Grunninger Games likely have their own lists of things they want to change about the endgame systems. Sweet, that was actually pretty decent. I'm happy with the divine from that. But overall, I think it's turned out quite well. The only other thing I was going to touch on is the rarity mechanic. I've seen a lot of people saying that running rarity is really important to ensure you're getting your currency and you're getting your items and stuff like that. I've not run any of that myself. That one I think is really subjective. The only issue there being if rarity is so rampant, it does begin to affect the in-game economy. And as somebody that enjoys player trade, I could see that having an impact. But that I simply put down to a balance issue. So that's one I'm not worried about at all. And I think if you are concerned about rarity and needing to use rarity in the end game, I'd say give it some time. Grunninger Games are probably going to be on top of fixing that. But I suppose if I were to sum it up, I would say the Atlas is a fantastic idea. I think its implementation is very strong, not perfect, nothing is. I think the biggest thing they could focus on changing is towers, because I know your really hardcore players love juicing their maps. They love getting maps really, really like throwing intense modifiers on them. Obviously, you've got to be careful because, again, with rarity, that will break things. But I think addressing the towers, I think addressing the citadels, because I know some people who just haven't found them, me being one. I know people who have found them. I think this single attempt on bosses potentially could be rethought. I think that might be a bit much. But again, I just want to know, is that their design plan? Is that something they want to continue? Because in a game like this, the telegraphing I think has been really solid, but it can be really rough. And then those expectations coming from Path of Exile 1 are definitely carrying over. But hey, look, those are just my quick thoughts from more of a casual perspective. I'd love to hear yours down in the comments. I always love talking about games with people, and I've heard a lot of mixed things on the endgame. So what are your experiences and what do you think so far? Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out. If you want to support the channel, you already know how. Throw a like on the video, sub if you want to see more, but you being here, that's kind of what really matters. Otherwise, I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, 4 PM Australian Western Standard Time, right here on YouTube and Twitch. So come hang out anytime. Other than that, have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.